Hey, good morning, Catalina Foothills Church and friends. Pastor John Stone with our Tuesday morning devotion. Looking ahead to our passage this coming Sunday as we do conversations with Jesus. This is a very familiar passage for both those who grew up in the church and even for some who don't. It's Zacchaeus, who was a tax collector. And in Luke 19, we hear, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Lord, look here and now I give half my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anyone out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount." And Jesus said, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is the son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." Gosh, what a beautiful passage. Let me make a couple points for us on a Tuesday morning. Jesus is entering the town, right? And there was a crowd there to see him, and the crowd was such that people who were shorter, and that may not mean extremely short, but were shorter, could not see. So in this case, Zacchaeus, and he's described as a chief tax collector. So a tax collector who actually had other tax collectors working for him, which made him wealthy, runs ahead and climbs in a tree to see Jesus. And when Jesus comes along and sees him there, he stops and says, "Hey, Zacchaeus, I want to eat with you." Now, the crowd, it's important to notice it wasn't the Pharisees, Sadducees, and teachers of the laws only, but the entire crowd. From rich to poor, from insider to outsider, everyone in the crowd, primarily Israelis, Jewish people, began to say, "He's gone to the house of a sinner," because Zacchaeus, who's Jewish, as a tax collector, is part of a corrupt system that the Romans have put in place to take a good bit of money from Israel to rule over the land that Israel believes is rightly theirs. So Zacchaeus is a traitor to the Jewish people. But we know from history and from reports that the Romans looked down on these Jewish tax collectors because they saw them as betrayers of their own country. And they weren't fully Roman, right? They were important to the Roman Empire for getting money, but they weren't embraced by the Romans, and they were rejected by their own people. And the way they made money as a tax collector, with a tax collector working for them, is they charged more. Whatever they charged above the tax is what they made. The Romans didn't pay them. So here's a betrayer of his people. Someone who stole state secrets, who cannot be trusted by either side. And Jesus comes into town and says, "I want to eat with you." So number one, Jesus teaches us quite clearly that we're to seek the worst among humanity at times. We're talking about adults, we're talking about Christians, but Jesus conscientiously and purposely goes to Zacchaeus' house, teaching us that the mission of the gospel, the mission of the church, is to seek out people who are betrayers, who are sinners, because the crowd is not entirely wrong. Now, the crowd is missing something. We're all sinners, but their condemnation, or more importantly, their thoughts about Zacchaeus are true. And Jesus is teaching us, I came to seek and save the lost, the one who knows they're sick. The second thing I want you to see is when Jesus says, "I want to eat with you," Zacchaeus becomes a Christian, and he immediately begins to give away his ill-gotten gain. And Zacchaeus, knowing the Older Testament, is actually obeying it when he says, "I give half of my possessions to the poor." Half. Just possessions. Not just money, but homes. And anybody I've cheated out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount, which is a reference to Leviticus, which is the command of the Old Testament. Jesus seeks out sinners. He eats with them. He redeems them, and they become obedient to him and to his word. It's a beautiful picture. And in a crazy conversation, the conversation is Jesus saying, I must stay at your house. And Zacchaeus saying, I'll pay back what I've given away. Grace and obedience. Grace is always first, obedience is second. If you reverse it, you destroy people. It's going to be a great Sunday, and I enjoy being with you. I hope you have a great week. We will talk to you soon.